Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So this is another sew along in my Russian pattern sew along series. Yes, it's going to be a series. I'm going to be making some videos from time to time explaining the Russian patterns that don't have English instructions for those of you who want to get stuck in. I'm going to do all of that work for you so you don't have to, and you guys can just follow along with the video. So today's video we are going to be sewing this top, which I absolutely love. This pattern is from Viki Sews and this is the Deborah top. At least that's what it translates to. I think it's one of the newer tops that came out maybe in the last month or so, and is actually pretty straightforward to put together. The sleeves are really nice and puffy, and it's actually put together in a really cool way, which I cannot wait to show you. So if you guys are interested in sewing along with me to make this top, then stay tuned. So this top is a really versatile piece because it can also be elongated to make into a dress, or you can actually like crop it and make it like a cropped version of this top. This top is actually quite long. It comes all the way down to my hips, but I have it tucked into my jeans at the moment. But the bit that I love the absolute most are these sleeves. Viki Sews is, I believe, quite a big pattern sewing company. I think the owner is called Viki. I actually don't know too much about her. I do follow her on Instagram and she has amazing style and her sewing skills are impeccable and her patterns are absolutely gorgeous. So if you guys haven't heard of Viki Sews, I will leave all the links below for her Instagram and also for her website. Before we get onto the actual sew along, I'll have a quick talk about the things that you might need, as well as how to navigate the website and how to pick your size. Now, in terms of the website, I would definitely suggest going onto a browser that has like an automatic translate. At the moment, I think it's only like Chrome that does that. I'm not sure if Firefox does. Safari certainly doesn't. So if you want just that ease of shopping, then go ahead and use Chrome. And yeah, once you get on there, it translates everything to English, and then it's like a really easy to navigate site. All of her newest items are right there on the front page, and you can kind of like flick through all of the things. And there is so much there. Not only are there women's wear in all categories, but there is also children's wear and there's men's wear. She also does courses online, so you can actually learn how to sew. So if you actually speak Russian and are thinking of like learning how to sew, that might be an option for you. There are also some videos on there. Some of the patterns come with videos for the more like difficult parts. So, you know, even if you don't speak Russian, you can still watch the video to see how to do maybe one aspect that might be quite difficult on the pattern. So that's actually really good. So when it comes to sizing, I actually really like the way that it's been done. So first of all, you need to kind of pick your height bracket. So I think there are like 5 or 6 different categories, and I think it's like increments of maybe like 5 to 10 centimeters in height. So once you can pick where your height is in your height bracket, then you'll go ahead and pick your size in terms of European sizing. So I picked a 38. I did go onto the sizing grid, and they put all the different like waist, bust and hip measurements for you to get like the idea of which one you should be in. And then that way you know that, for instance, I am 168 centimeters on the dot. So I chose the size bracket which was from 162 centimeters to 168. That was me. And then I chose the size 38, which is what I currently fit the most in for any of my size patterns. If there is any other like things that you might need to take into account, the pattern will also tell you if you need to like know something extra. And other than that, it was really easy to just pick my sizes. So do make sure if you have a translated site to just have a look at the little size guide just to see which bracket you fit in, and then it makes it really easy for you to choose your patterns. So since I've already made this one, and I'm not going to make the same thing again in this pattern, I'm actually going to make my one out of this really beautiful soft cotton lawn. It's quite a lightweight material, actually maybe even a little bit see-through. I think it's closer to a cotton voile than it is to a cotton lawn, but it is definitely 100% cotton, and it's got these cute little like raised textured bobbles on the front. So that's what I'm going to make it out of this time, and this will be like the summery version of this one, which is also made out of 100% cotton. So they're really nice and airy and perfect. So fabrics fabrics that I would suggest for this top, you've got cottons, linens, chambrays, nothing too drapey, like not super drapey, because you have these structured shoulders. So the more the fabric can be like puffed like a cotton or has a little bit of structure to it, the better the look is going to be. But that's not stopping you for using a drapey fabric. If you like your sleeves to be big but like drapey instead, this will also give you the same look with a drapey fabric. It just means it won't puff so much at the shoulder, but it will puff down here around your arm. So if that's another look you're going for, you can get the same thing just by using a different fabric. I wouldn't use a fabric that's like super thick. Even though you do want structure, you don't want it to be so thick that you can't actually move, because there is a lot of space in here, and if a fabric's too thick, it will be really stiff in the shoulders, making it uncomfortable to wear. So I would go with like a cotton blend with any of the other fabrics, like chambrays, maybe a cotton that's got a little bit of stretch, maybe those thick sateen if you're going for something like shiny, and maybe like evening, a brocade would work really well. So would a jacquard, because they're quite lightweight, but they are still got a lot of structure to them. And something like in luxurious fabrics also would look great with this neckline. This could be the perfect neckline for a really nice dress if you wanted to elongate the bottom. So in terms of opening and closings, you will need a invisible zipper, and obviously you are going to need your matching thread to your fabric. You're going to need some interfacing to interface your facing pieces. You're also going to need some edge tape. Now, edge tape is basically interfacing, but it comes in strips, and that means you can reinforce like corners and points, or like places where you might put stay stitching. In this case, we're going to put this on the rim of our facing, so this line of stitching here, everything stays to the inside, and it is like super stable around these stress points, which will be wherever there's a curve. The only other things that you're going to need is your sewing machine, your normal sewing tools, and if you have a serger. Now, you don't need to use a serger to like finish those edges, but I have one, so I'm going to use one. If you do want to still finish your edges, you can still do that with a sewing machine using a zigzag stitch or any of like the nice decorative stitches that kind of finishes the edge of a fabric and stops it from fraying. That's enough of an introduction. I am very excited to get sewing, so let's get into it. Okay, so these are all the pattern pieces that you're going to need for the pattern. I've already cut everything out here, but obviously you will need to cut these things out. I'm going to go through each pattern piece because you can probably see they're all kind of in Russian, although the only thing that's kind of in English is like the name Viki Sews. So starting with this first pattern piece here, you have the sleeve cuff. It's the only one really like it. In fact, all of the pattern pieces, they're all kind of like one of a kind, so once you label them you won't get them confused, which is good. So this is the sleeve cuff, and you will need to cut 2 of these out of the main fabric. This one here is the back facing. If you can see here, I've actually made it a little bit bigger in the center because I want to put a label here, but if you want to just go as normal, this is the back facing, and you will cut on the fold. This part here you will place on the fold of the fabric, and when you cut it out you'll have one piece like this. So you'll need one in fabric and one in interfacing. This is the front facing piece. So this is the bit that's going to sit underneath the front bodice. And also this also needs to be cut on the fold. This fold bit will be on this bit here where the arrow is. And these 4 letters actually mean cut on fold. So you'll see that in a few of the other places and you'll be able to cut that. So this is one in fabric and then also one in interfacing. The next thing that I've got here is the sleeve. Now the sleeve looks really quite interesting because there's all of this like detail here. The way that the sleeves are put together, you've got one small pleat here and then you've got one large pleat. And what happens is these pleats that way and then these pleat that way. And what it does, it ends up creating a full sleeve that has a really nice puff on the shoulder. So make sure when you are cutting this out that you mark where these pleats are. The good thing about this is that it shows you where the pleats go with these little lines here and what direction you should be pleating in. So these ones pleat that way, and then these ones from this point to this center point pleats in. So just make sure you mark these correctly, otherwise it'll be really difficult for you to do this pattern. Also at the bottom here, this wiggly line means that you're going to gather. That's what that wiggly line means. So you'll be gathering that sleeve so that it fits into this cuff. So for this pattern piece, you will need to cut 2 in your fabric. Okay, so now we get into the actual bodice pieces. First of all, you've got like the center front, which looks like this. This is the bottom bit of that square fronted bit, and you will cut on the fold, which is this side here where this word fold is. I'm not sure if it's the actual word fold, but I'm assuming that's what it means. So you'll need to place your pattern piece on the fold line here, and then you can cut it out. Then you only need one of these. Then you've got your center side pieces, so like the front side bodice, and you'll need two of these in your fabric. And this one's pretty straightforward. They just need to make sure you cut along with the grain line, but other than that, you do not need to cut on the fold. And then finally, you have the back bodice. Now this one is the one that you're going to make sure you make all your markings on, because we have a shoulder dart up here, and we also have this quite big back dart which kind of goes in the middle, which cinches in the waist and then goes out again, but it carries on all the way to the bottom. So in the pattern, you'll see that it doesn't actually finish. You just kind of tuck it in all the way, and it ends up looking like a princess line seam. So that's what you'll need there. So make sure you mark all of these points so you know where to put your darts in. And for this, you're going to need to cut two. This is the center back line here, and this is where we're going to put our zip. Make sure you put all these little notches in, because the way that this pattern is, the zip actually opens up from the bottom instead of it opening down from the top. So that's a really cool feature. Not only do you have the really nice sleeves, but when you open it, the zipper pull starts here and it will open up so that the bottom bit opens. So that is actually one of my favorite parts of the padding, along with the sleeve. So make sure you get all these notches in. And that is all the pattern pieces. So if you're wondering how I mark all of these pleats, I've got a little cloth marker pencil. I find that the pencils work better for me than like the actual triangular chalks. So what I do is, while everything's pinned to the pattern, I will put a pin through all the points of where the pleats are, and then you flip it to the other side, so then you have all the bits where the pins stick out, and then I just kind of mark that dot so that I know where they are. Then I peel it back, so on the other side I can also mark where the pin goes through. So when you open it up, you should have all the markings for the pleats. So now that I've marked where all these points are on both sides, I can take the rest of the pins out. Then you want to get yourself a ruler, and just looking at this for reference, you want to draw in those lines so that you know where your pleats are going into. But I'm going to do this on both sides, and then I'm going to mark the darts on the back piece, and then we will be ready to sew. First of all, you need to make sure your facing pieces are interfaced. So as you can see here, I've added the interfacing to these facing pieces. I've also added the extra strip of interfacing here to reinforce like those seam lines, and it's within the seam allowance. So that's what you need to do to make sure that these roll to the right side and stay flat when you understitch them. If they're not sitting flat here, then you need to snip into these curves so that it will stretch around the curve, especially around these corners. If you have the bands that I have, they're cut on the bias, so you don't actually need to do that. But if you're doing it from straight, then you will need to snip into those corners to make sure that they fit. So as you can see here, this is just one back piece. This is the back dart that we're going to do in a minute. But before we do that, the notch that we put in the center where the zipper is going to stop, from that point down to the bottom, you will want to put another strip of interfacing there, and that is so that when you put your zipper in, those stitches will be nice and reinforced, it will be strong, and it won't like rip the fabric, or like it will be good for the wear and tear of the outfit. After you've put your interfacing, you can then go ahead and close these darts. Now, if you've put a center line down the middle of your darts, it should be really nice and easy for you to just fold along that line and then use your line as a guide to sew all the way down to the bottom. And if you don't have a center line in this top dart here, you can draw a line from the straight down the middle into the center, and that will allow you to close that and then sew that dart close. So you want to do that for both of your back pieces. Okay, so as you can see, I have sewn the back darts and also the shoulder darts, and you want to press them towards the inside, so towards the center back. Now is a good time to overlock the seams if that's what you want to do. If you don't, then you can go on to the next step, but I'm going to really quickly overlock these back seams here so that when we put our zip in, it's also got a nice finished edge. The next thing that we are going to do now is put these back pieces right sides together. We're going to pin here and then we're going to sew right down to where the zipper starts. So right down to that notch. So this bit here we're going to sew and then you're going to press the seam open. So what I've done here is pressed open those seams so they're flat, and I've actually carried on pressing so that the same seam allowance is pressed open, which will really help when you add your zipper. I don't actually have any videos on my channel on how to use an invisible zipper foot, so what I will do is put some resources in the link below if you don't know how to put in an invisible zipper, but this is the part where you will do it. So we're going to be adding our zipper so that it opens from the bottom. So what you want to do is put your zipper top at the bottom of your back piece, and then you want to line that up so that the bottom lays in line with this notch. So I'm going to go past the notch about an inch so that we have a little bit of overlap, and I'm just going to put a pin there so that I know that's exactly where it's going to stop. Also, you want to make sure that this overlap at the top is also at the bottom. You're going to be hemming that area at the bottom, so make sure that that lines up right up with the edge, because then when you hem, it will be within the seam allowance and the zipper will stop directly at the bottom of your top. Okay, so we have added our zipper. It's all in and working, and then you want to kind of press this so that's nice and flat. At this point you should have your zipper in, and you should have snipped off the excess so that we can just finish that off. Now, a nice little thing that they do in this pattern is they show you how to put a nice little fabric edge so that it's not like scratching on your back. So you're going to just need a little scrap of fabric that's about 2.5 centimeters by about 5 centimeters. So that's like an inch by about 2 inches, something like that. What I'm showing you here is the end bit of the zipper. We're going to put that on top, right sides facing. Just going to pin that there so that it stays, and then we're going to sew across the top of this. Now that you've done that, you should have a nice little thing looking like this. Next thing you want to do is, using your iron, we're going to flip this back so that's nice and neat like this. So we're going to iron that back, and then we're going to flip this over to the other side. So it will kind of close like this. And then what you're going to do is right where we stitch that line, we're going to stitch another line going across. So once you've sewn that, you should have this. So then what you want to do is these 2 seam allowances here, you want to sew a line going down the side of the seam allowance. So just this bit here, and then also on the other side, and then you can snip off the edges, and then you've got a really nice flat zip with an end bit that feels nice against your skin because it's wrapped in fabric. So that's what we're going to do right now. So once you sew the tabs down to the seam allowance, then you have a really nice flat zip. You can go ahead and sew the zipper edges to the seam allowance so that it doesn't flap up. You want to do that at a really small seam allowance, as close to the edge as you can get. Okay, so we have one back piece all finished. Let's work on the front piece. Okay, so for your front pieces, you'll have your center front, and then you'll have your 2 side front pieces, and you will join them together right in this center point here, matching your notches together, right sides together. So you will join this one this way, and then you will join this one to this seam here, and then you'll sew both of these down. So once you've stitched, make sure you press your seams, and then we're going to attach the front to the back. So now that you've got your front and your back piece, we are going to join them together. So you want to put them right sides together and join them at the shoulders, and also at the side seams at 3/8 of an inch. So the next thing we want to do is join our facing pieces together. So you want to join them so that they're right sides facing. So it helps if you have the front facing up and then the back facing down, and you're going to stitch these two pieces together right here at a 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so you should have your pieces all together like this. Now you need to take it to the ironing board and you are going to open these seams and press them flat. So next we are going to add the facing to the front of the bodice. So right sides facing, so you're going to have your bodice with the right side of the fabric facing out, and then you're going to use your facing with the wrong sides facing out, so it's right sides together, and that is going to go over the top. So you should have some notches in your facing, which you can match with the notches at the front of the bodice, and you will match them together, matching these side seams with these shoulder seams like this, and matching the notches on this with the notches at the back. So pin all of this together, and then we're going to sew at 3/8 of an inch all the way around this inside seam. So it should be right through this reinforced area. So you should have stitched all the way around and attaching your facing to your top. So this is what it should look like. We're then going to try and help this facing sit on the inside and not roll over. So you'll see that there is a seam allowance here, and then you've got the facing, and then you've got the bodice. So this little seam allowance here. What we're going to do is press this towards the facing. So if I was to open it like this, you've got the main bodice, the facing, the seam allowance. We're going to press the seam allowance so that it is this way. Once you've done that, you can then take it to the sewing machine, and we're going to understitch. So on the side of the facing, I'm going to stitch very close to this seam on this side, stitching down this seam allowance to the inside of the facing. So that means when you do eventually turn it over, the facing and this small little seam here will sit on the inside, and it will stop the facing from rolling forward into the front. Because these are curves here that we're going to turn around to the outside, we want them to stretch open. So we're going to snip a few snips here and a few snips there, and the same in these 4 curves here. So we're going to start by snipping right up to the stitching line, but not through the stitching in these curved corners. So when you finished understitching, it should look something like this. This is the facing, that's the top, and that is the stitch which is on the facing side, which basically what it's doing is sewing down this little bit here. So now you can go ahead and trim on the inside, and then you can turn your facing to the inside and press. Okay, so this is what it should look like after you've pressed around, and you'll see that it's sitting nice and flat and to the inside, but you will get a little bit of flapping. So before you stitch this down, you might want to add a label. If you have like a label that you want to add, like this is the back, I made mine bigger so I can stitch one in this center here. So once you've done that, and if there's anything else that you want to add, then go ahead and hand stitch the bottom bit of your facings to every seam allowance that you can find. So this big center back one will be hand stitched to this seam allowance here, or hand stitch the shoulder part of the facing to this shoulder seam here, and then you'll hand stitch this front part of the facing to this front seam here. So you'll have 2 here, 2 there, and 1 there. So just a few stitches, and that should keep your facing from flapping up like that. But if you've got any labels or anything that you want to add to the front, do that first. So once you've done that, it's time to get on to the sleeves. Now, if we go back to the actual pattern piece, you'll see that there is a specific direction to which ones go first. So the small pleats in the center, you will pleat towards the outside, and these ones will be pleated 1. So we'll call these pleat 1. Now these big pleats are going to be pleated in towards the center, and they will be done after you've done pleat 1. So these are going to be called pleat 2. Okay, I'm just going to turn this to the side so it's a little bit easier for me to work with. We're going to pick up this line here, and we're going to move it over here. We're going to move that line so that it touches the other side of the pleat, and then we're going to pin it in place like that. And then we're going to do the exact same thing to the other side. It's going to be moving in this outward direction. So we're going to pick up that line, And there's like, as you can see, I've made a notch there, so I know that's exactly where it is, and that's the bottom. And then we're going to move that line to kiss the other side of the pleat, and then we're going to pin that down. So you should have something that looks like that. We've got like this nice deep pleated bit in the middle. So what was a super long pleat, it now has gone back to normal size. So we're going to take the outside of pleat 2 and we're going to move this so that that line touches this line here, and that it's like the curve is in line. So we want everything to line up really nicely together. And if you look, that is the curve of the sleeve. So now we're going to do that to the other side. So you want to grab that line, you want to move that line over to here, making sure all those curves are aligned. So then you end up with actually a pretty nice sleeve with this really deep pleating. So it's going to look really nice on the shoulder. So to keep this all together now, you can do a basting stitch, stitching through all the thickness to make sure this stays one piece, and then we can treat it like a normal sleeve. Once you've done that, go ahead and do that to the other sleeve, and then you want to put them right sides together and you want to stitch down the side seam. So at this point you should have 2 sleeves with a nice puff going on. The next thing we are going to do is put 2 lines of basting stitches at the bottom, because we are going to gather this. Okay, so you've made your 2 rows of basting stitches, and now we're going to gather this so that it is a lot smaller and it's going to be able to fit our cuff. So once you have gathered your edges, you can then put them to the side. Okay, so now we're going to work on the cuffs. We're going to fold them in half, right sides together, and you're going to sew 3/8 of an inch down the open side. So once you've stitched them together, you want to press open the seam so it's nice and flat, and then you want to fold in half, wrong sides together, and press so that it's in half. So you should have these 2 very nice looking cuffs for your sleeves. Now that we've pressed these in half, right sides on the outside, we're going to open them up again, but it really helps if you have like a sleeve ham or like some sort of sleeve that you can iron on. So now that you have made your crease in the middle, you're now going to fold up one side up 1 centimeter, and then you're going to iron that in all the way around, and you're going to do that for both sides. Okay, so then you have something that looks like this. So the next thing you want to do is get your gathered edge of your sleeve, and then you want to get your newly pressed cuff with your 1 centimeter allowance on the inside. You're going to put the right sides together, you're going to put the cuff over the sleeve. So you're going to distribute the gather so that it is the width of this cuff, and you're going to pin them together at this open edge here. So you also want to make sure that this seam line is also matching with this seam line here. So start by pinning those together first, like that, and then you can go around distributing all of these gathers so that they're evenly spaced all the way around. So this is what it looks like just before we're going to stitch, and you want to stitch around here at 1 centimeter or a 3/8 of an inch stitch, and then we're going to flip that to the outside and press. So if you've done this correctly, you should have a cuff that looks like this now, and on the inside you'll see that you have where you gathered and your folded inside edge. So turning it back to the right sides facing out, what you're going to do now is fold this in half so that this edge sits just below the gathered edge here. You want to fold that and pin into place. So basically you're folding the cuff to the inside so it covers the raw seam. So when you're done, it should look like this. The next thing you're going to do is stitch in the ditch along this stitching line here, and what that should do is catch the bottom of this fold so that it encloses all of this raw seam and it looks neat on the outside and also on the inside. Okay, so now you've got your 2 gathered sleeves. We are going to add them to our bodice top. There should be a notch on one side, and that should match up with the front notch. So you want to make sure that the notches are matching up. This one is the left side and this one is the right side. So best way to attach these is to put both right sides together, starting from the armpit seam. I normally throw one pin there to secure it, and then I flip it all to the inside, and then I can go ahead and pin all the way around in a circle. On the actual sleeve that we made, there should be one final notch in the center. That center notch needs to line up with the shoulder seam, and then you need to make sure that it's evenly distributed and smooth all the way around, and then stitch that in a 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam. So we are very, very close now. We have a top with sleeves, everything's in. You want to make sure that you finish those insides there. So I'm going to serge these so that we have a nice clean finish. And the last thing that we're going to do is this hem. Okay, so we are now going to do the hem of this top, and then we are all finished. So the first thing you want to do is finish those edges. So I'm going to use my serger and go around the edge. Okay, so now we're going to finish this bottom edge, and we've got our zip, and I've got my serged edge, which went a bit mad in this corner, but that's fine. We're not going to see any of that. So in order to finish this zipper, so you don't have this open edge right here, you're going to open up the zipper. We're going to unfold the seam allowance like this, and then you're going to fold it towards the front like that. So you're just going to fold it so that it just folds in on itself, and then we're just going to pin that so that it stays closed. So you're going to do that for both sides. So that one folds out to that end. This one folds out like that, and then folds over like this. And we're just going to pin that one as well. Because we used the top part of the tape, there should be about 1 centimeter before the zip actually starts. We're going to do a little stitch just across here, right where that stopper starts. So just in front of that stopper, it should be about 1 centimeter. And you're just going to stitch across to the end there. So just this little fold, we're just going to stitch just across that fold. Okay, so you should have something that looks a lot like this, and that will allow you to turn this to the inside and push that corner out. So then you've got a really nice closed edge there where the zipper starts. Then you should be able to close that and have a nice straight finished edge. And then all you need to do is fold 1 centimeter in at the bottom and then stitch all the way around. After you've sewed your hem, all that's left to do is a final press, cut all those little extra threads that are hanging on, and you have finished your very own Viki Sews Deborah top. Now let's see what it looks like on. Okay, so here is the top. It's all been made. This one has a little bit more of like a whimsical summertime feel. And I actually have a little bit of this fabric left. So I think what I might do is make like an elasticated waist skirt, maybe with a few ruffles, to then wear on top of this bottom, because I find that it is quite long down to the hips, and it turn it into maybe like a two-piece like a dress type situation. I think my favorite part of this whole thing is like how they put the sleeves together, because like they're really cute. And even though it looks absolutely crazy when you open out the pattern, as soon as you start making those pleats and folding it in, then you're like, oh, it's almost like a light bulb moment. So like I really enjoyed that the first time I made it. And yeah, that's it. This is my new top, and I will be making another in an Ankara print very soon. I've already cut it out, so that will be like my loud version. I'm very excited. Thank you guys for watching to the very end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, then hit that thumbs up button. It really helps to let YouTube know that you guys are enjoying my content. Let me know what you think in the comments. I love reading your comments, guys. You are very good at commenting to me. Do you want to see more Viki Sews patterns? Like, are there any other Russian patterns that you guys want to bring over to me? At the moment, I know about Viki Sews La Forme, I think that's what it's called, and Viki Sews, La Forme, and Grasser. I'm sure there are others. So if there are, I think Self Tailor might be one. If there are others, let me know, guys. I would happily go and have a look and dive down that hole. And if you haven't already, then subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. See ya.